Okay. I'm just going to put my picture on just to introduce, and then as normal, I will introduce. I just need to get the rules going. Anneke needs to start recording because we put this on YouTube for those people who don't know. If you go onto YouTube and you type in ASPASA, and I think you type in the subject matter, then it takes you to the YouTube connection, and then the episode is captured. But I just want to welcome everybody on this cold day, and thanks for joining. My chairman for this committee is Theodolan. He is such a positive person that I cannot not use him. It's so nice to have people like him and Jeremy, and there's a whole lot of other guys too that you just ask them and they carry on, and it's so important for where we sit now. And Aspaza is not Nico Pino, Aspaza is all of us. So that's great. If I see all the people who are so eagerly wanting to participate in some of the stuff that we do, and we're only trying to do as good as we can. I think, as you know, this is a Teams meeting, and I think we all know the rules of Teams by now. When you're not talking, switch off. I can't believe in some of the other meetings, like the Mine Health and Safety Council meeting, people leave their mics on, the haridas are flying around, the dogs are barking. So we don't have that in Aspaza, and the chairman has to say, put your mic off. So I think if we could just stick to that rule. I think also Theodolan is going to chair it. He's got the times there. We've got very, very, very good speakers today. Not many, but very good in-depth speakers. And I think this young professionals is needed all over. I've been asked even at the Minerals Council, they're saying, what are you guys doing for your young professionals? We've been asked by GAIN, we were involved with GAIN, and they're starting a whole training thing. We're going to use the UK IOQ to help us with some of the courses and some of the stuff that they're doing. But there's a big drive for young professionals. And when I say young professionals, you must just keep your eyes open. We're having very soon what we call women in mining, but we're not calling it women in mining, we're calling it something else, which is also important to bring the young ladies into the industry as young professionals. There's many of them around. So that's my introduction. Theodolan is a champ. He's driving this thing for us, and he's got contacts, and he's all over the place. And we've got very good speakers. I see Nikki Wagner has just come in. She's a professor at University of Johannesburg. So we've got very high-class people and good speakers today. So please, I'm going to quiet down now, and I'm going to hand over to Theodolan. Thanks, Theodolan.
Nico, you're not going to read us our rights first.
Our rights, yes. Sorry, I'm waffling along, but I think the rights are that we're not colluding. We're not allowed to collude. If anybody feels that we're talking about stuff where we're colluding, then please stick your hand up and make it known to us, because it is recorded. And then, of course, you can leave the meeting, and then it's on the record that you've objected. But we're not into that type of game. Aspaza has never been in trouble for collusion. And we have had the people come and sit in and listen and ask around. So I think that's crucial, that we're not into that story. We're dealing with a subject which is young professionals. Thank you, Theodolan.
Okay, morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this bitterly cold morning. I know I'm phoning from Johannesburg, so the sun is out, and hopefully it gets much warmer during the course of the day. I'm not sure how our friends in KZN and the Cape are doing, but I'm sure you all are doing well. Yeah, firstly, just a gratefulness from the KZN community and the adversity that everyone up to Midlands had to go through. So I did hear Jeremy speaking earlier, and it's good to see that the country and the people are being resilient in order to try and build the company back up. And I just hope that we can move from strength to strength, and get business back on the go. Yeah, we've got quite a good agenda today and some exciting news for some of the team members on here, and hopefully you can take it and share it with the youngsters in the group. So firstly, we are going to be starting off from an agenda perspective. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to what ASPASA has been engaging with EXA. And we have a speaker, Teresa Harting, PRN, to take us through the road to registration for some of us that have not registered as yet. However, it will be encouraging for us, some of us that are registered candidates and need to take that leap to that final interview or working towards that. And you're welcome to ask those specific questions in the meeting. So I've asked EXA just to tailor make it as a shorter version. It's usually 3 hours, but they've pushed it into 2 hours. However, if there's any other questions, you're welcome to contact me as well, being a professional engineer. And then we've got Prof. Nikki Wagner. Apologies if I pronounce that surname a bit off, but she will take us through at 11:05 on geoscience in the real world, the forever need for geoscientists. That will be a very nice topic. Then at 11:30, we have a student paper where Padima Ledwaba will take us on some interesting work that's been taking place on some of our jaw crushes. And I think you will be quite engaged in terms of that. So just a bit of background. We had our first meeting on the 11th of February. I did a paper for the team on engineer development in the industry. If you'll recall, I took you through to the current state of the industry, an overview on that. Then we looked at the National Skills Levy, just for incorporation of some of the skill development programs and some of the benefits that government gives us in terms of encouraging development in our area. We looked at career pathing as well as engineer-specific programs in line with our primary disciplines. And I touched on coaching and mentorship. So yeah, I think during the course of the future meetings that we will have, and we will engage more specific in quite a few of those areas to be unpacked. So it will be quite interesting on our ends. So firstly, I'd just like to start off from an ASPASA perspective. So within the last few, well, let's just call it over a year with all the issues with COVID, myself, I have to give a tribute to Anake and Nico in the background. We've worked with the EXA registering as a voluntary association. So that means that we are linked up now with EXA, and we will in future align some of the engineering programs where some of our members can get CPD points, and that will obviously be some steps to come. But what that allows us for the industry, our members in the industry, it allows us to align our skill sets so that we can build some competence from a professional engineering, technologist, and technician point of view. And further, some of us who are GCC engineers and want to move towards the professional certified engineer route. The engagement with EXA and allowing them to present will allow us on an ongoing basis to understand and align what's required for us on an individual and a company level for support to make sure that we get these individuals on the program and successfully pass through the program. Now, from a program perspective, and based on what our industry can facilitate, we may not be at 100% to complete the program. However, if we discuss and we understand what the requirements are, we can help each other to ensure that that 10% or so, depending on the discipline, we can assist the individuals in order to design or develop solutions. So I think please just make sure that you'll ask the questions that you would like within those 2 hours. And as I said to you all, if you want to take up anything out of that, you're welcome to take it up with me. I am a moderator, assessor, and a reviewer for EXA. So I'm quite a fay with the rules and what's required for you all in terms of getting to the interview stage. And obviously, partaking and ensuring that you all are confident through that process. Okay, Teresa will be starting in the next 5 minutes. So maybe I could just open the floor. Sorry, Aniki.
Yeah, sorry, Theodolin. She's just apologized. She's joining us within the next couple of minutes.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so maybe I can just open the floor since we have 5 minutes for any questions that you may have. Yes, is it Jeremy?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just a quick one. Obviously, it's something with regards to CPD points, and it's often through the Institute of Quarrying around the world. It's something that's driven quite hard, and I think it's a great move forward to trying to create within our industry. Our industry is very small, so I think trying to create an awareness and a recognition of CPD points within our industry across all members, keeping up to date with new technology and that kind of thing, I think is a fantastic move, and I'm really looking forward to getting that put together. And well done, guys.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Sorry, is it Anthony?
Hi, Theolin. Yes, just a comment from my side. Thank you very much. I just want to say well done on this one. I think this is a great initiative, and certainly I know the young guys in my team that are on the call are going to benefit tremendously from this. So please keep it up. I think it's really great.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Yeah, just to add to Anthony and Jeremy as well, it's important that we develop our bench reserves internally. In terms of our disciplines in our industry, it's also very difficult to shape these engineers. And I have a few of my team members or youngsters, engineers in training or junior engineers that have come through specific programs that we've aligned to ensure that they culminate the culture of our industry. And it works very well. So the only way we can do this is obviously encourage them, empower them, support them, and also put them under pressure to move up this route. Because a lot of us we call ourselves engineers, and because we've got a degree or masters, etc. But practically speaking, the turnaround on this is to make sure that we are only professionals when we do go through this process. And the reason why I say that is because we held accountable in terms of the specific rules that EXA puts out to take people and safety into consideration. And we think twice in terms of designing and developing in situations. Whereas when we're sitting in a company in positions of accountability and incorrect decisions are made, we do not think twice. So EXA actually holds us accountable in terms of ensuring that we provide the community and our stakeholders proper professional support. So I have honestly been through the program, and it's quite intense, and it's what you as an individual makes out of it. So it's not something that the company will direct you through. There's guidelines through that, but you as an individual have to go the extra mile. And just from a company perspective, we as employees and managers need to support these youngsters to ensure that they come up on these roles. So a lot of the engagement in this forum especially will be promotion, in terms of developing these youngsters and getting them to an extent that they need to take the baton and run. And I'm just repeating, from the first session that we had, coaching and mentoring, I will definitely put something properly together in terms of some of the theoretic and empirical studies that have been out there. So I will assist on that, and then engineering aligned programs. So obviously from our core business is mechanical, civil, and electrical, and then to an extent the mining engineers. I haven't forgotten about them. And then from a legal point of view, it's our GCC engineers. So this Taylor, so on the GCC engineer perspective, it's quite easy if you've got the relevant requirements, because they fall on the back of the DME. So that I'm not too concerned, but just on the mechanical, electrical, and civil, we have to ensure that the projects are suitable for that type of registration. So if you on a BSc or BEng program, and Teresa will take out that, you have to be at a specific level. At the technologist level, which is the BTech, BEng Tech, which is the new qualifications coming out, and the MEng specific on the follow-on on the BEng Tech. That will basically need to be at the technologist level, and we call it a broadly defined level. And then at the technician level, where you have a national diploma and associated qualifications at that level, you would have to be at a well-defined level. So there's quite a bit of reading to understand. But as I said to some of the youngsters here, there is support, and I'm also willing to assist where I can to ensure that you'll understand the requirements, and that at first go, you'll make sure that you'll come through this program successfully. The success of the program, from an experience point of view, is up to the individual. So you will not get through the stages, because EXA has in excess of, it goes through in excess of 20 professional, or 15 to 20 professional engineers. So it's not just that, it's your luck that you get through. It's definitely well rehearsed, and they ensure that when you approved as a professional engineer or technologist or technician, that they are comfortable that this person will enact the proper technical abilities to the team. Okay, so I see Teresa's not here. So maybe any other questions? Maybe let me hear from some of the youngsters that are on this call. I do apologize, I've just got the names here, but I think in future, if you could help out by just maybe putting your company name at the end, so I can just understand where you're coming from. But if I could just take one or two questions. Don't feel intimidated. This is a learning group, and it's very important that we speak and ask questions, because that's how we'll improve our abilities and make sure that we do well, especially with the road to registration. Parima, maybe we can hear from you. Yes, I think Parima is not online. Or maybe Kirat. Hi, Kirat.
Hi, Theolan, how are you?
Yeah, okay. So maybe you can ask a question from your end.
Okay, so what I was worried about, I just started from March last year, and since I've started, it's been COVID and all these things, and there'll be a lot of time off. So like with regards to you speaking about the CPD points, do you have to actually go through like training programs and stuff to get these points, or is it just your own experience in the plants and stuff?
Yeah, so Teresa I don't want to steal Teresa's limelight, but that's a good question. So the CPT points are broken into 3 categories. So the one will be on conferences, etc. The one will be on experience through, training programs. They allow us that's aligned with some technical understanding or management understanding. And then the third will be specifically on the courses, the technical courses that are registered through EXA that will carry CPD points. So some of them are a bit subjective that you'll have to apply for, and the others are aligned with the approval through EXA. So what EXA requires of that is that we need to have a split of, to be a fair in the industry from a technical point of view. So if you're an electrical engineer, we encouraging that you go for lectures in line of your discipline, and then also jointly aligned to your multifaceted discipline where you would work with civil or mechanical, etc. Then from a management point of view, more on your project management, on your supervisory courses, or management development courses that would add value on that. So all the promulgating there is to ensure that you aligned with industry standards, because even though you are a professional engineer, if you're not practicing in the field, it is a bit of a concern because you're not keeping abreast, with the outcomes of what's required in the position that you are signed up for.
Okay, so like as a example, in my case, as a mechanical engineer, you'll have to be more exposed to the mechanical part of stuff to get your PR in that department.
Yeah, so you would go for technical courses. I would use that. We would obviously want to see that you fay on the mechanical end. Maybe, we're not descriptive, but maybe on the electrical end, a few courses, one or two. But we're not pushing out. We want to ensure that it's aligned with the discipline. So remember, a mechanical engineer is not just a mechanical engineer. You may be, automotive specialist. So that's your field of speciality. So in that field, we need to ensure that you understand what's happening. You're aligned with the courses that you move in that direction.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Anthony, I had a question from your end. Anthony? Okay, I think Anthony just went off.
Theolan, yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Just for if you have a moment in today's program, I think there are a couple of new folk on the course on the call who are not completely familiar with what it is we're trying to achieve here. If you could maybe just do a little brief summary of exactly how this whole program fits into in place. If you have a chance to maybe just have a quick chat about that.
No problem. Anakia, just let me know when Teresa's online. Okay, so what we've embarked in as ASPASA, or from our individual companies, we've started the ASPASA Engineering Committee about 2 years back. And this committee or this young professionals team or committee has been put together. It's to give the youngsters a voice, or the engineers a voice. Let me not discriminate just the engineers, but the youngsters a voice in our industry to partake and to put together, some of the concerning areas and good practice areas that we can embark and work on. It is important for us to do this because the youngsters are basically the bench reserves in terms of our succession planning coming forward. So when we've started amalgamating from the engineering committee, there's quite a few papers that I've done on skills development and talent management. It's part of my doctoral studies at the moment as well. And what I've seen in the industry is that there is a niche in terms of us, or let me call it a broken linkage or paucity in the industry, especially in our industry, to develop skills. And if we are not going to take a stance on that, it's basically we are bringing in young team members for SLP requirements, social labor plan requirements, just to get the points. However, we are not reaping the rewards on both ends. So it's a double-edged benefit, as I see it, where from a company perspective, we utilize the skills in order to enhance our equipment and our processes. And in turn, vice versa, I want these youngsters to build their portfolio. So even though we may not incorporate all of them, and this is from an engineering training perspective or artisan perspective, we give them the necessary skills to ensure that it gives them an opportunity in the industry or out of our industry to develop themselves. Ultimately, we should not be selfish in order to ensure that they have the proper tools in place in order to build their careers. So the second facet of this is to ensure that when we develop some of these youngsters, is that we develop them into accordance of the standards that have been put in place. And one of them that we abide by is the Engineering Council of South Africa. So they basically have put in the standards or the standard holders in terms of becoming professional engineers in South Africa. So a lot of our youngsters that come through are mining engineers, civil engineers, electronic engineers that we partake in our areas. And while they are on these programs, the ideal aim of this is to align some of our programs, especially if you look at my company, we basically aligned our program to some of the requirements required from an EXA perspective. So what we're trying to do from a ASPASA perspective, and that's yet to come, is develop such programs that are generic in nature, and it is taken per company, and we sculpt that to the culture of the company to ensure that the talent management is incorporated with the skills developments that's required. Sorry, can I just pause there, Anneke?
Hi, sorry, Theoden. I've just spoken to EXA. They're apparently all working from home. So she might be battling with connection. They're trying to get in contact with Teresa. So I wonder if we can maybe suggest that if the professor is willing, if she can maybe take her presentation now.
Hi, morning. Yeah, if you give me 5 minutes, I just quickly need to reorder one sections of slides. Sorry, Theolen, you're muted.
Sorry, Prof, we put you on the on the stone now. So we'll give you a few minutes, no problem.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I just quickly was wanting to update something. Just having listened to what the purpose of the morning is, I just needed to put a little bit more context in here.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem, Prof. You let us know when you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, so
no pressure.
Yeah, no. So while we're waiting for that, so what we want to do of this is slowly we are, and I will discuss it with Nico as well, but slowly what we will do is we are going to formulate the team to take over and to chair these meetings from one of the young professionals, and for them to honest and come up with with questions and solutions and drive this committee. So that is what's important, and this committee needs to have a voice that will filter into the rest of ASPASA's subcommittees, which is the engineering, the environmental, and the safety committees, and where we can work in honest to ensure that we complement each other. So that's ultimately what's required in terms of this. So from an EXA point of view, if I just come back on there, we worked hard in the last year to ensure that we've aligned EXA and we become a voluntary solution. And Anneke will tell you we've jumped through loops to make sure that we resolve this. And now we're at a platform to take the next level. So the future steps from here is that the person that will lead this committee will work together with the other subcommittees and develop programs with our assistants to ensure that we help the industry to have a step ladder, to reach the goals that we want to achieve. So I hope that brings up a bit of a perspective to some of the new people that are in here. Okay, are there any questions further on that? So it also brings up. I see Robin Race is one of our GCC engineers that have joined us as well, and it also raises the questions where we want to develop some of our candidate GCC engineers, to complete the Annex JEs and to write the final exam. It's a good networking area for the technicians, technologists, certified engineers. To come up and discuss problem areas. The one presentation from Padima Ledwaba today, I think you guys will be impressed at some of the work that we're doing with the University of Pretoria to try and understand our notorious jaw crushers and the designs of the sub bases below. So I thought that would be something that, just in general to share with y'all, because I do believe that, with proper standards and processes in place, we can mitigate a lot of these fatigue failures that have been occurring in quite a few of our areas. So yes, this is also a learning platform. We don't need to share specific plans and all of those things. I would prefer that and just talk more in general. Okay. I've also opened up the chat group. Well, not opened up the chat groups on the side. If you could please, and especially some of you all who are introverts and a bit shy to chat, please bring forward.
Ja, ek bly maar net in touch met wat aangaan met ASPASA.
Sorry, Cobus, can you just put your phone on, sorry, your microphone on? Thanks, man. Ja.
Uitset op daai. Nee, ek het nog nie weer met hom opgecheck nie.
Okay, so I think Cobus kan hear me.
Ek sal nou bel. Maar as ek sê as hy nie nou al iemand het nie, dan gaan dit nie gejaag ding doen nie.
Okay, so I just saw Cobus mute his mic there. But I would also like some of the youngsters to bring in some problem areas on the chat group so that we can discuss it in the background, and it's also for the next presentation. For the next committee meeting, so that we can prepare accordingly on it. I have a hand up from Mr. Is it Petle? Oh.
Yes, Thielen, how are you?
Yes, good, and you?
Is Ruben, aka Sticks from.
Hey, Ruben, how are you, man?
No, I'm right, yourself.
No, good, and you, man.
I must commend ASPASA for looking into the interest of the young professionals in our industry and in our quarry industry in particular. I think it's a good initiative. So well done, guys. One or two questions for me. That for some of us, not young anymore, but we're still young, we took the production route in terms of our careers, as in production management. One way or the other, one might be wishing to go back into engineering. Is it too late, or are there ways to reroute back into engineering, or you'd rather suggest or recommend that rather follow the GCC route?
Yeah, Ruben, maybe we can take that offline. You're welcome to give me a call, but it's all dependent on your qualifications and what you're passionate to pursue. And I can assist you, just to look at a timeline. If you have, as I said, some of the qualifications that Teresa will take us through, you may, we call it a responsibility E level. So you need to be enacting those duties. It'll probably be a more extended time. So if you have a national diploma, you probably need 8 years at a level E, which is enacting those duties. So if you have that and you can publish it, then you can apply, towards your professionalship. But I think, Ruben, if you don't mind giving me a call after this meeting, I can assist you with some career development.
Thank you so much, Thiele.
Okay, just quickly, I have Anneke, and then Prof. I think Prof is ready.
Okay, Ms. Thielen, I just wanted to say Ixos just called me back. They managed to get hold of the presenter, so she's going to join us shortly.
Okay, so I think let's go ahead with Prof. Wagner, and then we'll move over to Excel.
Okay, so do you want me to commence? Okay. Sorry. Just lower my hand. Okay. Morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Could you tell me if you can see my presentation or my other screen?
Prof, you can see it?
You can see the presentation screen. Okay, let's check. All right, still there?
Still there.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present at this forum. It's really exciting to be able to participate in these young professional days. I do realize this forum is very much focused on exercise, but when I met with Nico last month or the month before, he thought it might be useful to provide an alternative career choice, an alternative perspective within the mining industry. So globally, there is a trend of decreasing numbers of geoscience students, and we are seeing this in South Africa as well. This is possibly due to the misperception that we don't need to explore for minerals and commodities anymore. We know that, or we hear often in the news, that mining is very bad for the environment and that there's no need to use coal because we've got a lot of alternatives. But some of these are complete misunderstandings and the information is not correct. So the presentation I've put together for this morning, Geoscience in the Real World, the Forever Need for Geoscientists. My name is Professor Nikki Wagner. I'm a professor of geology here at the University of Johannesburg. I'm also director of a Center of Excellence of Integrated Mineral and Energy Resource Analysis. I also would like to just thank my collaborators, or actually I borrowed some of this presentation from Professor Batter-Smith and other colleagues within the geology department. So, are you aware that South Africa is a geological paradise? We have so many geological sites in South Africa that really we are world famous, and we have people frequently visiting us in the geology departments. We have a lot of international lecturers and researchers coming to South Africa because of our geology. Some of our rocks are well over 3.7 billion years old, located in the Barberton area. And these are some of the oldest rocks in the world. And we're busy with a big international project at the moment to drill into some of these rocks so that we can gain further understanding of what is happening, how our world formed, how our Earth formed. So South Africa is a home to a geological wonderland. We are privileged to have some of the oldest, the biggest, the most valuable rocks globally, rock structures globally. And we also hold the cradle of humankind up here in Gauteng, which I'm sure you've all heard of, with regards to origins of early humans. So more than 2/3 of the Earth's history are recorded in South African geology. As I said, we can go back to 3.7 billion years of Earth history in the Barberton area. We've got many other really famous areas within South Africa, the Witwatersrand, which hosts the gold deposits, the Bushveld complex, which holds PGMs and many other minerals that are really important globally or mined for global applications. We've got the Vredefort impact structure, which is the largest impact structure, meteorite impact structure in the world, just to the south of us in Gauteng. The Cape Fold Belts, beautiful mountains there, the most famous city in the world, Cape Town. We've got fossils within the Karoo, diamonds in Kimberley, and the cradle of humankind. So all of these have occurred at different geological times. So geotourism and geoheritage are two areas that are rapidly growing in South Africa to be able to show the world our natural features that we have in our country. But from a more practical side, are you aware of all the raw materials required for the local carbon economy, the low carbon economy or the green economy? I'm sure you all hear in the news that we need to stop using fossil fuels, the problems with climate change, the need to move and to go green. But what people forget is that going green does not mean that we don't need raw materials. In fact, we need increasingly numbers of raw materials, geological raw materials, in order to meet growing demand for the low carbon economy, such as lithium. The demand for lithium is going to increase by over 900% due to our need for wind turbines, magnets, solar panels. Cobalt, graphite, these are all commodities that are mined, and they're not mined in Europe. So where are they going to be mined? They're going to be mined in the rest of the world and produced to meet the demand of the new economy. Are you also aware that cell phones?
Somebody has connected on.
Are you aware that cell phones contain rare earth elements?
So yeah, I'm just trying to follow up.
Sorry, could you put yourself on mute, please? Sorry for that. So are you aware that cell phones contain rare earth elements? Rare earth elements are commodities that are mined from the earth. Rare earth elements have applications in electronics, military equipment, cars, catalysts, batteries. In terms of cell phones, many people in South Africa have 2 cell phones, which is estimated and there are estimated 70 million cell phones in circulation just within South Africa alone. So that's a lot of material that is required for a cell phone. And where does that material come from? There is a list of raw materials referred to as the critical raw materials. This list does depend a little bit on which country, because each country has their own demand for certain commodities, raw materials. But this is typically a list, I think it's extracted from Europe, that's just showing a whole variety of different raw materials that are required. These all require, apart from things like natural rubber, everything else on this list needs to be mined. Oh, sorry, that graph didn't quite work. It was meant to show where these commodities can come from, and just to highlight that South Africa is a supplier of many of these commodities, including the platinum group metals. We're one of the world's largest suppliers of this. We supply bauxite, and we supply a lot of some phosphorus, silicon metals, tungsten, vanadium. We're one of the largest suppliers in the world. Coking coal. These are just some of the ones that currently we are mining within South Africa. But how do we find these raw materials? How do we find these vitally important raw materials that are necessary for our future economy? Well, this is where geology comes in. So geology is the study of the origin and evolution of the Earth and the other planets in the solar system, but we're not going to deal with those today. So a geologist is a person who studies the Earth and the planets with the purpose to better understand the history of the planet, to explain current problems, and to predict the future by understanding the past. We need to find adequate supplies of natural resources. This includes groundwater, petroleum, metals, anything that is required to promote and allow us to move towards that low carbon economy needs to have a geologist. So a geologist is a key contributor to the welfare of the mining industry. Geology is the first step in mining where it is necessary to prospect for the mineral deposits. In the old days, people used to walk around in the fields and create maps. That still happens. But more and more people can rely on Google Earth images or drones to map areas, and highly advanced techniques such as magnetometers that are flown in aeroplanes to create an understanding of the Earth structure. That all falls under prospecting and exploration. And we need to explore to understand the extent of an ore body and predict the life of a mine. Whether this is for a gold mine or whether it is for a quarry, you still need to understand where does that ore body go, how much is there, how long can the mine remain open, can it be improved, can you find more of your ore body. So geologists need to work closely with the mine managers to further develop a mine. And a geologist is responsible for determining the location and the grade of the ore, ensuring that mining extracts the maximum grade for profitable, to make the mine profitable. So a geologist needs to work very closely with a mining engineer. A geologist needs to work very closely with metallurgical engineers or mineral process engineers. A geologist must be familiar with the structures of the rock formations and must have a broad knowledge of the minerals, the properties, the appearance, whatever they're looking for in that particular mine. A geologist also needs to be involved in searching for groundwater for hydrogeology. We know the issues in the Eastern and the Western Cape over the recent years in terms of water shortages. So hydrogeology is a really important discipline to try determine where can we find suitable groundwater. Geologists are involved in petroleum exploration as well as studying natural hazards such as rockfalls, earthquakes, volcanoes, and generally in terms of how to preserve the environment. So there are a lot of different disciplines within geology and earth science. On the right-hand side, it shows the applied geology, which is the traditional geology: mineralogy, sedimentology, geophysics, geochemistry, paleontology, the study of fossils, hydrogeology, volcanology, looking at volcanoes, and planetary sciences. Increasingly, geologists are working or needed in these multidisciplinary domains: environmental sciences, analytical, civil, climate studies, economics, astrobiology, oceanography, data management, petroleum industry. And of course, there is the ever-changing mining industry as well. So geology has many aspects within it. In terms of becoming a geologist, you do need to have a university qualification. Typically, a geologist would undertake a 3-year BSc degree, Bachelor of Science degree at university, and there are a number of excellent geology departments within South Africa. And geology is taken as the major module, major subject. What is required, though, for a geologist to be able to register as a professional geologist is an honours degree. A 1-year program after your BSc, and then after that you are able to register with SACNASP, which is the South African legislative regulatory body for natural science practitioners in South Africa. So comparable to EXA, not quite as regulated as EXA, but it is the national, it is the regulated body for natural scientific professionals. So once you finish your degree, you can then go work, or you can carry on to do further studies, MSc and PhD studies. Typically, at most South African universities, you would undertake geology with another major, such as chemistry, maths, physics, or even geology with applied geology. At Stellenbosch, they've recently introduced geology with environmental sciences. You can also do geology with geography and geology with environmental management. And typically these combinations are offered at most South African universities. An example of a curriculum at UJ is that you'd study minerals and rocks in your first year, and igneous and metamorphic rocks in your second year, and sedimentary rocks in your third year. But what you do note is that it's compulsory to attend field excursions in each of these years. And this is a requirement for all geology courses around the world, is that students need to have a minimum number of days in the field. And you'll see that a field excursion is a compulsory module at each year of the studies. And again, during the honours year as well, there are a number of field excursions. The purpose is you don't want a geologist just to be a geologist behind a book. You want a geologist to be a geologist who's actually been in the field, been to a mine, seen the rocks, mapped the areas. So in terms of career paths, these are the more traditional career paths that people might think of. If you're a geologist, you can go to academia, you can work with the government, the Department of Minerals, Council for Geoscience. You can become a miner, work in the mines, or work in exploration, become a consultant in exploration. Maybe you are working in a project that's in a remote area of Mozambique, and you've got to be the exploration camp manager and set up everything to do with the camp, which some people really enjoy. You're really remote and stuck in the middle of nowhere. Other people find it really difficult, and they'd rather be a geologist in a laboratory. So as well as those traditional jobs, there are many, many other jobs where geologists can find their place. Increasingly, we need geologists associated with climate change. The reason being, if we don't understand the past, how can we predict the future? We know from looking at geological history that the world has been far warmer. But what happened during those times? What happened when the world had higher oxygen levels? And with this information, we're able to provide some input to the current changing world that we find ourselves in. So, sorry, in South Africa, there certainly are ample career opportunities for geologists within mines, big, small mines, and beyond mines. Geology has been identified as a scarce skill by the South African government. In terms of the type of person that would be suitable for geology, you need to have someone who has an analytical nature, attention to detail, comfortable with technology. Increasingly, geologists are required to work with big data, drone technology, modeling, advanced modeling programs to be able to model ore deposits. You need to have effective communication and be able to multitask. You'll find geologists, if you go into a small company, a small mining operation, a geologist needs to become involved in a whole lot of different aspects and work closely with the miners and the engineers. The love of outdoors is a distinct advantage, but it's and a lot of people choose geology because you're going to go on field excursions during your degree, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So in the USA, I was looking at where is the future for geoscientists, and we know globally that there is going to be a shortage of geoscientists in the not too distant future. So USA indicate that the demand for geoscientists into the future is a job that is likely to grow faster than any of the other jobs that they list there. There's a need for geologists in energy, environmental protection, responsible land and resource management, and this will certainly spur the demand for the geologists and the need for geoscientists in the future. So perhaps engineering isn't for you, but then you could consider becoming a scientific professional and consider geology as an alternative career. So thanks very much for your attention. Hi.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Prof. That was very insightful. I can assure you we have a few PR ScienceNet qualified people. And obviously, with this being recorded as well, we will definitely share that out. Thank you very much for attending as well.
Sure, yeah, and I'm willing to take any questions if there are. I'm sure we've just got a few minutes that we could spare.
Anthony?
Thanks, Theolan. Prof. Nikki, thank you very much. That was really informative. Just a request from my side. Would you be willing to let us use some of your slides? I just found the information specifically on the minerals that you were that will be needed very interesting. Would you have any objection if we use those?
No, not at all. I think on most of the slides, hopefully I've put the reference where I actually got that material from. There is a lot of material available on the internet. So yeah, it's not something I created. I just pulled it off the internet and put it together. So you're more than welcome to do so.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nico?
Thanks, Theodoran. Prof. Nikki, just on the lighter side, for the first time in my life have I heard what a geologist does. I always used to think they were driving around in old Land Rovers looking for diamonds. So thanks a lot for your enlightenment. You've educated me. Thank you very, very much. And thanks for coming. You're a star.
Okay, sure, it's a pleasure.
Prof, just last thing on my side, we will obviously need future engagement from yourself and the experts in that area because we want to develop that career pathing stream as well. So I know there has been some work done in my company as well, but I would definitely like to get hold of you to assist us, especially in this committee, so that we can get the proper career pathing on the way.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, on with that to move on with the agenda. I see Ms. Teresa Hutting has joined us. Hi, Teresa.
Hello.
Hi, Teresa.
Hi.
How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
You had some problems in the morning. Don't worry. I tried to hold the fort up.
Yeah, shame. Thank you very much.
Teresa, if you don't mind, I'd firstly like to welcome you. I did do a welcome early on. There's a lot of youngsters here that would like to understand the road to registration. I have mentioned that you are PR-Eng, and if you could just take us through the road to registration fairly at a high level. You can go into depth on certain areas, but I would like to allow a few minutes at the end for some questions. Some of the individuals that are on are candidates. However, the biggest area for them now is to make that turn around to get through the 11 outcomes and get ready for the nice interview that awaits them. So just as an encouraging perspective, if you could just allow us that, and we'd be happy to take any questions, offline from there as well. Okay, so with that, welcome, Teresa, and all the best.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dylan, and thank you very much for accommodating me. Thank you to Prof. Wagner for stepping in. There was a bit, I missed the email completely with the agenda, so I didn't realize it was still happening. I'm really glad it is. And I'm really glad that I can be here to assist today. So I'm gonna share my screen, and EXA provides a set of standard slides that they use for these road to registration sessions. Can you see this road to registration slides on the screen at the moment?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. All right, great. So I'm gonna turn off my camera to save some bandwidth, and we can put it back on again at the end for questions. So this is a slide pack of slides that EXA prepares for road to registration. It's 45 slides long. It's quite a lot of detail. So and I think sometimes people want some practical tips on kind of the process as well. So I'll go through these quite quickly. If there's something that really catches your attention that you'd like me to spend more time on, please do let me know. And then I can spend some more time on that specifically. And then it would be really great if we could spend some time at the end asking questions, because sometimes people have kind of really practical questions. I know that registering is a very scary process. A lot of people, I think one of the main reasons people don't register is because they don't know what to expect, and that they're basically scared of the process, which is really not good. So I am currently a lecturer at the Northwest University in Industrial Engineering. I'm also on the Industrial Engineering Council, and am a professionally registered engineer. And I did that some years ago as a mature candidate. So that was quite a good experience, actually, despite all the fear going into it. So I can share that with you. And I think professional registration is really important. So that's one of the two things people always ask is, why should I register and how do I register? So we'll hopefully cover that today. Registration is really important. It's essentially as engineers, engineering professionals, and technologists and technicians, it's about us being proud of our profession. It's about us protecting the work that is done in our profession, and it would be really encouraging to see more and more engineers registering in the future. So I'm going to change on to the next slide and hope everyone can see that. So the table of contents that EXA prepares really talks about the regulatory context, which is quite interesting, and the built environment landscape, the regulation of the engineering profession, then the relationship with voluntary associations, which I'm sure ASPASA is one as well, then role players related to registration, the professional development model, and then thing that I'm sure everyone will want to spend quite a bit of time on is the actual registration requirements. So just a bit on the regulatory context. Just maybe if I can say, I saw that the chat was deactivated for me. I don't know if it's deactivated for everybody. So if anyone wants to ask a question, please just shout and I'll stop and you can ask a question. So anytime you can chip in. So this whole process of registration really comes from our constitution, and that the fact that the constitution says that the practice can be regulated by law. And South Africa has chosen to regulate the engineering profession, and this has given rise to the Engineering Profession Act. And then EXA has been established to take on the role of regulating the profession, and registration is essentially a tool that EXA uses to regulate the profession. So this is how it fits in to the government. So it falls under the Departments of Public Works and Infrastructure, and then we have the Council for the Built Environment, and then EXA sits below that with a whole lot of other associations as well that are now responsible for regulating the specific professions. And this just also gives you some understanding of the governance of all of this and how the governance works. And I suppose that the important key thing is this really is legislation, and the tools and procedures and policies that EXA puts in place to register people really do need to align with all of this in order to accredit professionals. So EXA is specifically responsible for accreditation, registration, and quality assurance. So accreditation is the accreditation of the institutions, the higher education institutions that offer the degrees that form the knowledge base for the different professions. And then there's registration, which is when you change from being a candidate engineer into a professional engineer or technologist or technician, and then the quality assurance that gets associated with that. And then once you are a registered professional, then there's the element of continuing professional developments, or CPD points, that goes along with that they monitor on an ongoing basis. So the three categories of registration that EXA regulates includes a professional engineer, a professional engineering technologist, and a professional engineering technician. So these are the three categories that are regulated and registered through them. And this is how the hierarchy of the registered persons is set up. So at the bottom we have some specified categories. So there are some specified categories that are of people that also get registered. I'm making an assumption that the people in this room don't fall into that category, because this slide pack's not really aligned for that. But if they do, then you can let me know, and perhaps there's a separate session that can get run for that.
Teresa,
Yes.
you're correct. So we're just focusing on the engineer, technologist, certified engineer, and technician. That's
Okay,
it.
perfect. Excellent. Thank you. So after you've studied and you've got your qualification, you can then register as a candidate. And as you said already, you have some candidates that are already registered, and that's great. And you'll be registered in your category already. And then once you have enough experience and you feel like you have met all the outcomes that EXA requires, then you can go through your application process, your registration process. And if you are successful, then you become registered as a professional, either engineer, technologist, certificated engineer, or an engineering technician. A specific question a lot of people often ask is, do you have to be registered as a candidate before you are able to apply for registration? And the answer is no, you don't. But obviously registering as a candidate is good from the perspective as that you're then on that pathway, and a lot of organizations support that through kind of formal mentorship programs, etc. If you don't have that, it's not the end of the world. You can still register to be a professional, and sometimes those people will fall into categories where they, for example, haven't had formal training programs that align with EXA and set them up to register, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't have got the right experience. Sometimes those people also don't necessarily have mentors, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well as to what you do in those circumstances. So there's 3 stages in the professional development model. The first one is stage 1. So the first thing you really do need to do is to meet the standard for engineering education. So we'll talk about that in the next few slides. What does that mean? But it does mean that you have to have some form of education that enables you to go into the next phase. You can then register as a candidate upon graduation, and then you go into stage 2, where you're then building up your training and experience based on those knowledge and skills that you learned when you were studying. And then at some points, typically we say not less than 3 years later, you may have met all the outcomes, and then you can register to become a professional. And then you go through the registration process, and if successful, then you can go on to be a practicing professional. And then there's a 5-year renewal period, and you have to provide evidence of continuing professional development, or CPD. You also are then obliged is not the right word, but you are then, as a professional, you're required to observe the code of conduct, EXA's code of conduct, and then there's also annual fees associated with that. So a common requirement for all applicants is the educational requirements. So you need to, in order to even be in phase 1 of this game, is you need to have an appropriate educational qualification. So EXA has a whole suite of accredited qualifications. That was that first step where we said one of EXA's roles is to actually evaluate and accredit higher education institutions to be able to offer EXA accredited qualifications. There are also a suite of qualifications that are recognized under a variety of accords, which depends on whether it's which type of qualification it is, depends on what accord it will be acknowledged under. And there are also alternative paths where, if you can present, for example, the last point there, present a combination of evidence, which will then be determined by EXA. And it's the important thing there that the educational achievement is substantially equivalent to an accredited qualification. So phase 1, that baseline, means that you need to have provided evidence that you've met all the educational requirements that aligns with what EXA wants. So if you studied at a higher education institution that is already EXA accredited, that's obviously the easiest route. Or if you studied in another country and it's registered through, it's recognized through one of the accords, that's also good. If not, there are paths where, for example, there are committees that will, even before you register, they will evaluate your educational achievements in kind of a similar way to they would do when they went to an educational institution. They'll kind of evaluate, have you met all the educational requirements? And then they will decide whether it's substantially equivalent or not. And so that's kind of the first step in the process. And then registration does not involve that at all. So once you've kind of ticked that box, that's moving forward. You know, they just want a certificate to say you have the qualification. So then, to attain registration in a professional category, an applicant must demonstrate, number 1, that they've met the educational requirements. That's the first step. And then number 2, that they demonstrate competent performance against the prescribed standards for registration in the category. So we'll speak about that a little bit later. There are 11 outcomes that get defined, and those are what the panel will look at when you submit your registration documentation and when you go for your interview. And it is generally believed that you cannot develop the necessary competency in less than 3 years, which is why you should have a minimum of 3 years of training and experience. So that because there are different categories of professional registration, you'll see on the screen, here's the different categories on the left-hand side, the education, the number of associated education years, and then the training and experience. So you can see, you can maybe have a look to where you fall in. but generally 3 to 4 years of training and experience. And it's really important, we'll get to this just now, but it's really important that I'd say 2 things, like just if I can give some tips as kind of a mentor, 2 things are really important is that you make sure that in the 3 to 4 years, you're getting the right type of training and experience. So working for 3 years is not necessarily going to be enough. And that's why sometimes it's good to register as a candidate engineer. I personally wasn't registered as a candidate engineer, but I think it does help in that it starts to make you think about these outcomes right at the start of your training experience, so you can align your jobs and your tasks in a way that enables you to meet all those competencies. And then the second thing is just to really document your experience and training as you're going along in your career. I think it's one of the most daunting tasks that people have, is to try and prepare their registration application documents, 4 or 5 years into your career, and to go back and have to think about what you did and how you did it, etc. Sometimes the experience we get in hindsight, if you actually look back and go through it in detail, it was so much, but because it's so far in the past, you almost forget what you've done. So it's really useful to try and document that as you're going along. Otherwise, it's a very big job to put those application documents together. Here's just some information on alternative routes. So I'll just leave this on the screen maybe for a minute so everyone can take a look and find whatever it is your qualification is. And we will you have a recording, but we also provide the slides afterwards, so you can go back and have a look at this if you need to. Right. So EXA has a website, which can be a little bit intimidating at first, but all the information that you need is really on EXA's website. So if you navigate around for a bit, you'll find that there is a lot of documents and forms and everything else that you need to fill in, and everything is there. There's a lot of things for universities and for the educational qualification side of it, and then there's the things for registration. So you'll see that they have all these documents and they all have these numbers, and PRO refers to a procedure, and there's some POL refers to policies, so you can kind of start to get your head around some of these. And you'll also see that the application documents refer to these documents all the time, and they provide very thorough detail of everything that's required. So we don't need to necessarily go through each element of it now, but to tell you that this is all available on the website. So for example, there's a registration policy, which tells you exactly how the application and assessment process works. There's the qualification standard, which has got a whole bunch of information on the educational qualifications, etc. Then there's the competency standard, which links in. So those are the competencies that you need to meet. There's a training and mentoring guide that can be used. Yeah, and then there's also, which is quite useful, right in the bottom right hand corner, there's a discipline specific training guide. So there's generic competencies, etc. But there's also discipline specific training guides which can help you in your specific discipline, like discipline would be civil or mining or industrial. So all of these are available on the website. So there are, as we said, there are 3 different categories of registration that EXA accredits or registers candidates in. The first is an engineer, the second is an engineering technologist, and the third is an engineering technician. The outcomes are very similar for all 3 of these, actually. What changes is the level descriptor, which you can see in the right-hand column, and the qualifications that align with each of these are shown in the middle column. So we're going to go through the outcomes now, and we're also going to explain these level descriptors. And you can see then that, so all 11 outcomes apply to each category, and depending on which category you're in, you'll be looking at a different level descriptor, which really is around complex problems, broadly defined problems, and well-defined problems. So we've spoken about this, so really a minimum of 3 years post-qualification in order to enable you to achieve all the competencies. And it does depend sometimes on what you've been doing for those 3 years, which is why the earlier you can be aware of the outcomes, the better. So this is just about a little bit about the different roles in this process. So as the candidates, you are ultimately responsible for your career and your training and for registration, etc. There are some roles that come through in the application documents, however. So there's this notion of a supervisor. So the supervisor will be the person who directs and controls your work, and who's kind of your manager, who's looking after the work that you're doing when you're getting your training and experience. Supervisors are required to kind of sign off on the work that you've done, to say that it is actually the work that you've done. So when you prepare your application documents, there's a whole bunch of information you need to provide on what you did in what periods, and your supervisor will need to sign off that accurately reflects what you've done. And then sometimes people have a mentor. Sometimes their supervisor is their mentor. Sometimes people have a mentor that actually sits outside the organization, and that will depend on you. Some people don't have a mentor because maybe they didn't think about registering when they started working, and that's also okay. We'll get to the registration documents in a bit. You do need to complete either 2 or 3 referee reports when you apply to become a professional, and there is a requirement that those persons that complete those documents need to be registered with EXA, which sometimes, if people don't have professionally registered persons in their organization, can be a bit tricky, and that's sometimes why also people have mentors. So some of the voluntary associations set up candidates with mentors, etc., to help people kind of sign off their registration documents before they submit them. Right, so how does these registration requirements work? So as an engineering practitioner, you're able to perform the functions that you perform because of your knowledge, your skills, and your attitudes. And you'll see these things creeping into the competencies that we'll talk about just now. And how do you develop competence? You develop competence through education, training, and experience. So you'll be doing work under the supervision of hopefully qualified engineering supervisors and professional mentors, sometimes not, but you're doing it in an engineering context. And you have a whole bunch of tasks that you need to do. You may have specific training that you do as well, and hopefully all this aligns to enabling you to meet those competencies. And depending on how set up the candidate registration process is in your organization, this may be very formal, or it may rest completely on you to kind of develop your own path. And both are equally able to allow you to register. So essentially, this is kind of the big, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. These are the 11 outcomes that we'll be talking about that you get evaluated against if you want to register. So the stem of each outcome is the same, so you'll see now what that means, but the sort of essence of each outcome is the same, but they are distinguished by those level descriptors, so the complex, broadly defined, and well-defined problem. So it's the nature of the problem that differs for the 3 categories, but the outcomes are exactly the same. This speaks a little bit about those level descriptors. So here you can, for example, see like outcome 1 is define, investigate, and analyze complex engineering problems. So in the engineering column, in the engineering technologist column, it will be the same, but instead of complex, it will just say broadly defined or well defined. So there are 5 groups that these outcomes are grouped into. So this is the first group, engineering problem solving. So I'm going to just use the middle column to go through these with you now. So this is the most important thing when completing your application documents, is ensuring that you meet these outcomes. So The registration process, I'll jump ahead a little bit, but the registration process, the way it works is you complete your application documents and you submit them to EXA, where some quality control checks are done. And then those documents are sent to a panel of evaluators who then read through the reports that you've submitted, the engineering report and the training experience reports in conjunction with the other documents. And they will read through each of these outcomes and assess whether they think you have demonstrated competence against these. That goes through, a series of moderation steps, etc., which we'll get to just now. And then if they think that your competence is indicated in that desktop review of your reports, you will get invited to an interview. And then in your interview, you will again get given an opportunity to show that you've met these 11 outcomes. Some questions will be asked. And if you demonstrate competence against all 11 outcomes, then a recommendation gets made that you can be registered. If you don't, if any of these are missing, then there's a variety of processes which will happen depending on where that happens. And we'll speak about that just now. But if you're planning to apply for registration, you need to go through every single one of these outcomes. You need to understand them, and you need to personally reflect on, do I think I've met this outcome? And if you can say yes, then it's great, you can complete your documents. If you say no, then you have to kind of go back to your boss and ask them, I don't feel like I'm getting enough of this yet. How can we incorporate this into my training and experience? So we can work through them because I think they're quite important. So the first one is define, investigate, and analyze broadly defined engineering problems. So there's a few keywords that the panel will look at, and they will ask, did this candidate define problems? Did they investigate problems? Did they analyze problems? Were the problems broadly defined engineering problems? And if they can answer yes to all those questions, then they will tick that box. So in your reports, it's really important that what comes through is the investigation, the analysis, how you did these, and the nature of the problem. You need to show that it's a broadly defined problem, show what makes it a broadly defined problem. The next outcome is to design or develop solutions equally to broadly defined engineering problems. So they want to see in your report, where have you as an individual designed or developed solutions? A tip here as well. So in your report, they really want, it's perhaps not something we do as humans. We're not often, we don't like to always speak about ourselves, especially in engineering. You work in teams, and a lot of the time you want to say that it was a team effort. But for your engineering reports and for your application document, you really need to tell the panel what you did. So you need to say, I developed this, like I did this analysis. This solution was my idea. And where you, and it is very difficult in an engineering context to do that because you are working together as a team. So you can explain what was your role in the team, but they want to see what you did. They don't want to get the sense that you sat on the sideline and watched other people doing it. And I've seen many applications where, although the candidate did do the work, they were very hesitant to kind of emphasize their role. And sometimes we can unpack that in the interview, but it's very important that you explain what you personally have done. The third block is around comprehending and applying knowledge. Principles, specialist knowledge, jurisdictional and local knowledge. So this applies to the types of problems that you're solving, but where's the engineering basically in what you're doing? What kind of engineering are you using? So you can draw on some of the knowledge and skills that you learned when you got your qualification. Where are you applying that specialist knowledge that somebody else who didn't have that qualification wouldn't be applying? Right. So in group B, this is about managing engineering activities. So the first one is that they want to see that you've managed parts or all of one or more broadly defined engineering activities. So that's a very strange sounding sentence. Anyway, but so they want to see that you've managed it. So you may have managed some people, you may have managed deadlines, you may have managed some money, you may have just managed some deliverables for particular clients, but explain how you have managed that, how you were responsible for managing it. And again, make sure that you show that the activity was broadly defined or equally defined as per the category that you're applying for. And the next one is about communicating clearly with others in the course of engineering activities. So this is a nice one because we do work in teams with a lot of stakeholders. So showing how you communicate clearly with others through meetings or documents or reports, etc. The group C is about the impact of engineering activities. So 6 is about recognizing and addressing the reasonably foreseeable social, cultural, and environmental effects of your engineering activities. And I think talking to this audience, there are a lot of opportunities for that. So just explain how you are aware of these problems. So for example, you will notice that it doesn't say manage or, you know, investigate and analyze. So you may not have physically been the primary engineer responsible for some engineering impact assessment, but you recognize the importance of these. You understand how an engineer should address these. And sometimes people have not necessarily been exposed to all aspects of this, and maybe one aspect is stronger than another. But don't wait until your interview to be asked this question. Kind of anticipate that this is what the panel wants to see. So make sure it's in your report. Explain, give an example, and it can be any example. It can be an example that was in the first year of your experience or the last year of your experience, explaining how you were exposed to this and how you understand the importance of this. So 7 is very similar in a way, and that's about legal and regulatory requirements, health and safety. So the same kind of thing. You need to show that you understand the importance of these, that you've been exposed to them in some way. So another great way with this is just to give some good examples of how, think about examples in your career where you've most been exposed to these elements. Group D is about acting ethically, exercising judgment, and taking responsibility. So this is kind of this is almost, if you can think about it now, the kind of higher level skills that you need to develop in order to act as a professional. So 8 is about conducting engineering activities ethically. So go and read the EXA Code of Conduct, understand what it is that EXA requires of you, and then again, think of examples. Where have you been exposed to this? Where have you been challenged with regards to ethics? What kinds of problems do you think engineers get exposed to in this space? 9 is about exercising sound judgments. So how do you go about decision making, making sure that the judgments you're making are sound, based on evidence, and incorporating actually all these other elements that have come before: ethics, safety, environment, social aspects, etc. And then 10 is about being responsible for making decisions on part or all of specifically defined engineering activities. So coming, I suppose, back in a little way to one of the previous ones on management. So how are you responsible for making decisions? So these, again, this will probably come a little bit later in your career. So think of an example where you were given the freedom to make decisions. How did you make decisions? So this is important here. This is not about awareness. This is you being responsible for making decisions, which is important. And then the last one is about initial professional development. So this links into CPD, continuing professional development. So the panel wants to see that you understand and that you're already taking action to develop yourself as a professional. This is normally not that difficult because as a young candidate, you probably did undertake training activities, and maybe you've been involved in your voluntary association, but also just appreciating what you will need to do if you are registered. What will you need to do going forward to maintain your registration when you re-register every 5 years? Right. Something else that's quite important that the panel will look at is the degree of responsibility. So there are 5 levels of responsibility. So being exposed to things, assisting with things, participating, contributing, and performing. So one of the things that they ask on the evaluation forms is, have you been operating at a kind of performing level for at least 1 year of the 3 years experience that you have? So as you progress through your training, you will go from kind of being exposed in your induction period, etc., to maybe assisting someone, working underneath someone, then to participating more actively in teams, contributing. You'll be given pockets of work and being asked to do them. And then performing, you'll then be working in a team without supervision, and you're responsible for your own work. So you can also go and have a look at this. So the previous slides and the slide, make sure you understand this and that you can self-evaluate your application form against this, and that you talk to all these aspects, because the panel will be looking at this. So make sure in your reports it is clear when you were performing, when you had level of responsibility, and where you were assisting, because everyone will have that in their application as well. Everyone will have started somewhere where they were assisting as well. So essentially there's a progression of your competency level from appreciation to knowledge to experience, and then ultimately capability. And that's what the panel will be looking at before they are going to register you as a professional, because when you register as a professional, then you have been deemed by essentially the Engineering Professions Act as a capable engineer, or engineering technologist, or engineering technician. Right. This is quite useful. We won't go through it in too much detail because there's kind of one set for every type of defined problem. But something people often ask, and it's even as a panel when we evaluate applications, we're wondering, like, is this a complex problem? Is this a broadly defined problem, etc.? So we'll just go through the first pack of complex engineering problems. So you can see here on the right-hand side of some really useful criteria. For example, does it involve in-depth, fundamental, and specialized engineering knowledge? Is it ill-posed, underspecified? Does it include components, parts, or subproblems? Is it unfamiliar? So it doesn't need to tick all of these boxes, but if it ticks some of these boxes, then you can say that it's a complex problem. Do the solutions involve wide-ranging or conflicting issues, such as technical and engineering issues and interested or affected parties? So depending on your category, you will go to the set of steps, main questions, and criteria for your type of problem. And then you can start reading through it to get a sense of, am I doing the right kinds of problems? So here's again a test for a complex engineering activity. So I think, firstly, sometimes we do activities at the right level. We just don't always formulate them in the right way. So perhaps you have done a complex engineering work, but then read through this, because this is what the panel will look at, and make sure that you're explaining some of these elements. So for example, you're including some of these in the context or the description of the work that you're doing, so that the panel can see that it is a complex engineering activity. This is also good for reflection. If you go through this now and you maybe have 2 or 3 years of experience and you feel like perhaps the work that you've been doing isn't sufficiently aligned with the work that's required for your engineering activity, perhaps you can speak to your boss about saying, I need more broadly defined problems. I need more complex problems to work on if I'm going to be able to present my registration documents. Okay, so this will be really useful for you when we give you the slide pack. You can go and look for your type of engineering problem, and you can go and check that the work that you're doing aligns with that. So this very complicated diagram in the PowerPoint version, which they don't give me, like, you can tick through it so things appear one at a time. So this is a bit hectic because everything's on here at once, but we'll try and work through it from the top, and you can go and look at it in detail afterwards. So you will initially submit your documents. And then those documents will go through a quality screening just to make sure that everything's there and everything's signed. If your qualification doesn't automatically meet the requirements in terms of, as we described in the previous slides, there might be a step there where they will get your qualification signed off first. And then once the qualification is signed off, remember there were 2 steps, the qualification and then the experience and the competency. So once your qualification is signed up, it will then go to an experience appraisal. So all the documents that you submit get put in a pack and they get sent to at least 3, and it depends, so at least 3 or 4 registered persons registered in that category. So that's also important to know. So if you are applying to be a technician, the people evaluating your experience appraisal will be professional technicians. So that's important to know. And they all evaluate that documentation separately, individually. They don't necessarily, they don't even know who the other evaluators are. So it's not done in a panel setting. So 4 people get sent these documents, and then they have to tick off against each outcome whether they think you've demonstrated competence. They can also say the competence is indicated and it needs to be verified at the professional review. So that's essentially what they do. They will just say, yes, these documents indicate that competence is there. The candidate can proceed to the professional review, which is the interview. So you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's a bit pale on my screen, but there's like on the left hand side, there's a green arrow and it says 3+ CI. So that means at least 3 people said competence indicated from the documents. Then it goes to a moderation phase. On the right hand side, there's a red arrow which says 2+ competence not indicated. So that's kind of how it will be. So that's basically saying that 4 people will look at it, and it goes to a panel of 1 to 2 moderators who then review all 4 reports against each other and will then make a decision. So that's why the green arrow is there. So if 3 people evaluated and said, yes, competence indicated, then you're likely to go to the next step, the professional review. If 2 people or more said that competence was not indicated, then you will not go on to the professional review, and then they can make a recommendation for more information to be supplied. So sometimes they ask for more information to be supplied in a written format or in an interview, and sometimes they will ask you to keep your application in abeyance. And what that means is that they don't feel that you're ready yet, and you have 1 year to go and work, and they will give you specific feedback, like these are the competencies that you don't show, that you haven't indicated competence in yet. Go away for a year, get this competence, and then come back, and then it will go through that loop again. If most people were happy and you had 3 or more people that indicated competence and the moderator signs it off, then you can go to your professional review. So the professional review is the interview, where 3 registered persons will sit in your interview. You get to present a summary of your experience aligned with those outcomes. The panel will also have access to your documents that you submitted and to the reports that were written by the peers at the EA stage, and then they will make a recommendation. If you have, then those recommendations again go to a moderation stage. If you have 2 or more positive recommendations, it's likely that the moderator will recommend that you are registered. If not, then they will recommend that you are not registered, and then your registration will be refused, and you will need to then apply again another time from the start afresh. So a refused candidate can reapply. You'll have to go through the whole process again, pay the whole fee again. There is an appeal process that is available as well if someone disagrees with any of those steps. I think that sums everything up. I'm sure there'll be some questions just now about it. And then you get if you're registered, you get a certificate. And there's a digital certificate that gets issued. There's an international register that's open then to any EXA registered professional. Yeah, and that's a little bit on the international registers. I'm not going to go through this. I think there'll be more questions around the other things, which I'd like to leave space for. So maybe just a note on how the voluntary associations work. So voluntary associations support the work that EXA does. EXA formally recognizes all voluntary associations. And the voluntary associations support EXA by providing assessors, review and moderators for this process, by enabling CPD opportunities to be available to their members. A lot of associations also help with mentors, training like this, supporting their members to become professionally registered. And that is it on the formal slides. So I think maybe we can stop now for some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. I know it's a bit of a mouthful for this team, but maybe we can start off. Please let us know what questions you'll have. Okay, Anthony.
Hi, Teresa. Yes, I think a lot of very scared people on the call now after that one. But just a quick question from my side, going back to the sort of early part of your presentation there, you mentioned supervisors that must sign off on engineering activities and so on. The qualifications of those supervisors that would be acceptable to EXA, what would that sort of be?
Right, so there's sort of two sign-offs that are required. So firstly, to step back, like I really don't want the session to end with everyone being scared, so we need to fix that. But but regarding the signatures, so the first thing is that your supervisor that can confirm the work that you did needs to sign off the work that you did, and that can be anybody. So basically, it just needs to be your supervisor. So whoever that person is, they may not even be having any professional qualification aligned with engineering. You know, they could, for example, well, now I'm speaking out of turn. I don't think geologists. I mean, geologists don't fall, fall into the Engineering Professions Act. I don't think, but they could be a geologist. They could be an accountant. They're basically signing off on the engineering work that you did to confirm it was that work. So they're not evaluating your competence anyway. They confirming it is correct and accurate, right? But then there are the referee reports, and that's where a lot of people struggle. So it's 2 referee reports for some categories and 3 referee reports for other categories. And those people have to have registration. They have to be registered with EXA. They even have to write their EXA number there. So if you're lucky and in your organization you have people like that, then you can ask them to sign your documents off. And presumably they won't just sign them, presumably they will chat to you and have a look at what you put together, and then they will, they also have to, so they have to submit a confidential referee report where they actually have to indicate whether they're a colleague of yours, whether they're a supervisor of yours, etc. And then they have to evaluate you also against kind of a set of criteria to say, yes, I believe this person is registered, ready for professional registration. So if the person was your boss, then it's easy, then they know you. If they were a colleague, it's easy, then they know you. But if, for example, it was a manager from a different department, maybe they didn't even know you, they will probably want to spend some time like understanding what you've done and getting an understanding of whether you're competent before signing it off. So our voluntary association, SAI, what we do as well is we give people mentors, and that's often why people use mentors, because they don't have a professionally registered person at their company. They've never worked with one, and now they can't get their documents signed off. So then they will approach a voluntary association to get a mentor, and that mentor will maybe work. And for example, I have a mentee at the moment. I've never worked with a person at their company, but we're kind of through a series of sessions, like working through what work did they do, etc. So I'm helping them to put the documents together, and making sure, helping them, that's what a mentor does, like helping them make sure that they've met all 11 outcomes before they submit their documents. And then I start to get a sense, and then I could complete the confidential referee report. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks, Teresa. That makes complete sense. Thank you.
And Anthony, maybe if I just add in there, you must look at RO4P, which is the training and mentoring document that EXA puts on their website. And then just to add in that the new rules where you should have 3 or 4. So the PR is 3, provided one is a PR Eng. On the PR Eng section, which are BSc and BEng. And then your PR Tech Eng, which is your technologist, you'll need 3. But if your supervisor is not registered, then you'll need a 4th referee. And then the same with the PR Techni as well. I think they had a slight modification this year, Teresa. But
Okay.
100% right.
You know what I mean? I think even in industrial engineering, so for industrial engineering, very few people are registered. So sometimes it's a real fight to try and get those individuals. Sometimes you're the only industrial engineer at the entire organization. So, but there are ways and means, and the voluntary association really will probably help you to find people who will help you. And just for information, you can get CPD points for mentoring people. So people really want to mentor people. I mean, not only do they want to give back and develop young people, but they also get CPD points for it. So kind of incentivizes people to be mentors.
Yeah, the issue will be for a lot of the smaller organizations is we just don't have, as managers here, we have young folk that are coming through the ranks, but we don't have the top structure doesn't have the depth that it should have in terms of professional engineers, etc. So that is definitely going to be a challenge for a lot of people. But no, thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Yeah, Anthony, that's exactly why ASPASA now has linked up as a voluntary association, so that you can network, with all of us to ensure that we could help each other out, specifically what Teresa's talking for mentoring and coaching. Thanks.
Thanks, Theo. Yeah, no, that it definitely makes sense.
Could we hear from some of the youngsters who are registered on the program? Must I highlight you? Okay, so Teresa, we had a question on CPD points and how that works. Could you just probably just give us just a snippet? I know you just went through that, but there was a question from Kirat on that.
No problem. So firstly, maybe important to mention that CPD points is only important once you are registered as a professional. So before your registration, you don't need any CPD points. You can get them if you want, but they're not required at all. So once you become registered, you then need to gather CPD points over a period of 5 years, and every 5 years, EXA will surprise in a very short period of time, send you a document saying you need to complete this. And there are lots and lots of ways. So there's also on EXA's website, there's I think now a new CPD portal. I don't know if it's live now, but and there's a document that explains all the different ways that you can get CPD points, which includes, for example, going to a conference, writing a conference paper, acting as an examiner, like at a university, mentoring people to become registered. And there's a series of categories, so you have to have kind of a certain number of points from all the different categories. So you can't have them all in one category, but I mean, for example, even you can even in some of the categories say, I had to study on a brand new topic. Maybe I had to learn all about this aspect of mining, which I didn't know about before, and I self-studied it. And I spent 100 hours self-studying it. You can put that in as CPD points. It will count into one of the categories. So there's lots of opportunities to do it. You do kind of need to keep track of all those things as you're going through your 5 years, and make sure that they're spread over the 5 categories. But if you're in, like being on a voluntary association, counts for points, all of that. Doing an online course counts.
Okay, Jeremy, we have a question from Jeremy.
Yes, hi, good day. Yeah, I think it's a question maybe from my side. Just I'm not involved in professional engineers or anything like that. But just trying to get a bit of an understanding. Institute of Quarrying globally, they have within their own structure the means to create CBD points, and it's maybe more of a comment to the whole platform. It's recognized in the Institute of Quarrying elsewhere, and maybe there's something as a quarrying or surface mining that we start to recognize that CPD points are important for all our managers, even if they're not engineers as such. Is the industry or are the individuals leading our industry keeping themselves abreast with mentoring new techniques coming out? So I think it's something we need to maybe have a look at in a broader platform, not only on the young engineers, but across our industry, to make sure that everyone is keeping up to date and keeping abreast of changes and mentoring and so on. So I think it's more of a comment that we do, and maybe a question is, how do we create that within our own industry and a tally to make sure we're keeping everyone up to date on that as the engineering sectors do. Thank you.
That's a very good point.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. Nico has a question.
Morning, Teresa. I'm Nico Pino. I'm the clown that runs ASPASA. Very nice meeting you, and sorry for the problems that you had this morning.
I'm sorry.
And welcome. We might have to use you much more than just today. If Anneke will has your details. I just need to, and it ties up with what Jeremy just said. We've already had questions where people say, can you give me CPD points? Now, how do we as ASPASA, part of EXA, how do we give it? Is there a guideline document? Is there forms? Can I get them from you? That's my first question. My second question is, for example, we as ASPASA hold environmental audits and health and safety audits, where we have an independent person that goes out to a quarry and sits there a whole day, very, very good audit, both of these two systems, best in the world, we could say. We've tried it out with other organizations across the world because we're part of a body called GAIN, Global Aggregate. So we took it there and we showed them. Now, if a young professional sits in on a whole day audit on environmental, for example, would he get CPD points for that? Would that count towards his professionalization and health and safety, which is all part of our part of the industry, mining? I'm just using those two as very important things. We have other subcommittees too, like technical. We've got a very good technical guy. We've got an explosives guy. We've got a transport function. So where does it stop and where do we cut it off? So, because if that works, if you say yes, that would be a great marketing tool for us to say, if you sit in a audit for the whole day on environmental affairs and you participate, of course, we've had people sleep. But if you participate, then you can get a CPD point. Is that possible?
Yeah, no. So I mean, I like speaking now for my role in SAI, which is the Institute of Industrial Engineers. So SAI is a registered, I don't know what they call it, but now we are registered to give CPD points. So for example, like an organization like SASL, they develop a course and then they apply to us. We evaluate their course and we say, SASL, we allow you to have 2 CPD points associated with this course. So that's already a marketing like thing. So we allow organizations to register their training, like even higher education institutions, to register their training with us so that they can advertise with CPD points. So you have to get a license to do that. So I can put you, if you mail me, I can put you in contact with Lynette, our administrator. She just did that for SAI, so you can do that. So that would be the first step, is to register ASPASA as a licensed CPD accreditor. And then absolutely, so we run conferences where we give CPD points. We run courses where we give CPD points. I mean, the audit is interesting because we don't have audits, but that sounds like a definite yes. Like that is a definite CPD activity. Like and I'm sure you'd have to go through the process. I'm sure you could, and like it's normally a one day would be 1 CPD point. So yeah, like I think definitely, and then you as the licensing body could license it. So, but if I put you in contact with Lynette, our administrator, she will help you with all of that.
Thanks, Teresa. You're a star. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Teresa, I'm just leading you into some questions for the youngsters, so just bear with me, right? So the question that I'd like to ask is that what we notice is a lot of our academia BTech or BN students run away from the registration process because of outcome number 2, which is design and develop a solution.
Okay.
So in the industry, there's obviously challenges. We in the construction industry, or let's call it open cast mining. And the question was asked earlier as well that we would not be able to get all exposure, depending on the facet, the engineering discipline that they sit in. So what recommendations would you have in order to assist these youngsters?
All right. So I'm not in that industry, so I can relate to my industry a bit better,
yes.
But let me just maybe work through it. Engineering professionals solve problems. So I'm pretty sure, I imagine that maybe the youngsters are like underestimating what they're doing, or maybe like making the design sound too big, for example. So design and develop a solution to a problem. So, you can have, it doesn't mean design a mine or like design a piece of surface mining equipment. Like that isn't what it could be. It could be, for example, we had some sort of maintenance issue where, the same problem kept popping up. So I investigated the problem, I analyzed the problem, I found out what the root cause was, and I developed a solution. And the solution could be like a new maintenance strategy. It could be new procedures and processes. It could be contacting the supplier and getting a modification made to a piece of equipment. So you don't need to have like CAD drawings of like a mine or machinery. Like I said, you have to design a solution to a problem. I don't know if that maybe helps. So maybe they're thinking too big.
No, perfect. And then if I add on that, one of the biggest aims to this is that you are using your primary discipline, BTech or BEng or National Diploma Studies by first principles, so that you're able to apply your theory post-graduation to the application itself. I think it's very important from both Teresa's facets or on our engineering facets that it's seen through. And specifically what she's mentioned is that it is your own work that comes through and not that you're just involved. EXA also stipulates where Teresa went through, the responsibility level is very important. So I think we obviously asked EXA and Teresa just to shorten the slides a bit, but there's different responsibility levels for each one of the outcomes. So if you look at the design and develop, you should be between participating and contributing. Whereas if you look at maybe outcome 1 and 3, I'm just using as an example, you have to be performing on that, so taking the lead. So where we're coming from this is that you'll need to ensure that you're aligned with the documentation before you'll start, completing the TERs, which is the Training Experience Report, and finally your engineering report, your ER. And then on top of that, Teresa mentioned with the CBT points, we don't need it early on. But when you'll do your application, we complete IPD, Independent Professional Development Form. So we're also looking in terms of, how have you all kept up abreast, to that point where you're applying. So it's very important that information is recent. as best as is possible. And you do not need to spend money all the time. Even if you go on to, nowadays we working from home most of the time, or some of us. So just try and get onto free programs or webinars, that you can add on to that. We will take that into consideration as well. Okay, Padima Ledwaba, you have a question to EXA?
No, Theolan, thank you. No, I have nothing at the moment. Everything has been covered from the presentation.
Okay. Okay, Teresa. I don't think there's. Oh, wait, just hold on 1 second. Okay, we have a question from Kirat.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you for that presentation. I've seen there's 5 groups from A to E, right? I am registered as a candidate engineer currently, and each group has subcategories. To cover each subcategory, do we just have to show one example or one task that you worked on just one example that will cover that category? You don't have to do like many or anything.
So yes, I mean, you have a training and experience report where you will outline all your training and experience, like for the 3 years. So there's sort of 2 reports. So that's the one where you will explain from January, like it's like a CV, like an expanded CV. From this time to this time, I was in this job. This is what I did. This is who I worked for. These are my roles. So some of it will come in there. And then the engineering report, you kind of need to work through, some more concrete examples where you explain how you've met each outcome. But you need to demonstrate competence against each outcome. So if in your first year of experience, you demonstrated competence in an outcome, that's done, like dusted, you know what I mean? So exactly what you've said, you need to give one really good concrete example for each outcome.
Okay, I see. I have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So since stuff like with COVID and stuff, we're not being exposed to much projects and stuff. Yes, there are a few, but not as much as we'd like to. Can you perform like case studies on existing equipment to show that, to confirm that it's designed correctly, and will that be acceptable in those portfolio reports?
I think you'd have to chat to your kind of manager and mentor about that. It sounds like it probably would be a no. Yeah, but I mean, you'd want to try and make that as practical as possible. A lot of those outcomes are around. I mean, maybe for some of them, but I mean, if you do a hypothetical design study on something, the problem is how does that affect like stakeholders and complexity and everything else if you don't have real clients? So I'm not sure, but I'm tending towards a no. But it's a very interesting question.
Okay, I see. Because maybe it could cover some parts like design or something, but maybe other aspects it wouldn't cover.
Yeah, so you just have to be careful. Like I wouldn't bank all my luck on that.
Okay.
Yeah, Kirat, if I answer that for you, it's exactly what you said. So there's 2 ways of skinning the cat, is that you articulate through a few projects. That's why you have the periods there. But it is a difficult one to get through if it cannot be assessed.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other questions? Okay, Teresa.
Can I make closing comments?
Yes,
to get back to Anthony's point. I think a lot of people are scared of this. I was scared of this. I think that the most important thing is we're scared of the unknown. I think a lot of people are scared because they don't really know what's expected, right? What is expected is very clearly articulated in the EXA documents. Like it's those 11 outcomes at the 5 competency levels, and you just need to, it's like almost like studying for an exam. Go and look at the criteria, then work through your training and experience and kind of explain to each one of those competencies what you've done, and then identify where the gaps are, go get some more work and fill in the gaps. But I think if you've prepared, like studied, if you've prepared and studied and like done the work, and you present it in a way that you and your mentors or your bosses can help you kind of present it in a way that it centers around what you've done. It's not something to be scared of. Like the people are not trying not to register you. Like everybody wants to register to register new people who want to be registered. So I think it's the unknown that makes people scared.
No, thank you for that, Teresa. We really appreciate that. Team, if there's nothing else, I'll just have parting words from Teresa. We thank you very much for presenting this, and yeah, we hope to get quite a few more candidates through the members here and trying to assist them to achieve the EXA goals. Thank you, Teresa.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, I think that was a very nice summative explanation in terms of what's required. It is a daunting process, but I think as Teresa explained it, you just got to chip away at it, slowly and gradually. And I think if you have the correct mentors and supervisors, direction wouldn't be that bad. The biggest thing about going down this route here is that it's not to be rushed, and it's about to do sequential steps and making sure that the right experience is given. Understandably, at the end, it's not just about the title. There's a lot of safety aspects that comes with this title. So the individuals that do make it through, the onus is on them to ensure that the design and develop solutions hold tight, at that stage when they implement. Is there any other questions on EXA? Okay. So I think the next step now, we're moving on to the agenda, is we have Padima Ledwaba, and he's going to be taking us through a student paper. And yeah, I think we'll be quite ecstatic or interested in terms of his presentation that he's put together. Okay, Padima.
Thank you, Leoland. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everyone. My name is Padima Ledwaba. I'm a junior engineer at AfriSam Construction Materials. I'd like to firstly thank the committee for allowing me the time to present one of the jobs that we're currently busy with. Today I will be presenting the effect of dynamic loads on the fatigue line of the jaw crusher subframe at one of our quarries. The presentation is divided as the bullets are shown below. One, it's the introduction. Two, I'm going to give a brief history of the plant's jaw crusher and subframe. Three, I'm going to the problem statement of the newly installed jaw crusher subframe. Four, the jaw crusher subframe model. Five, the dynamic response and stress analysis of the existing jaw crusher and the subframe, and then discuss the results, and thereafter give the conclusion and recommendation, and also show the proposed solution for the subframe in context. A jaw crusher is a primary crusher with a reduction ratio of 6 to 1. Sorry about that. The reduction ratio is between the inlet and the discharge area of the crusher. This correlates to the feed material that's fed into the crusher and the expected discharge product from this crusher. The crusher chamber of the jaw crusher comprises of the stationary jaw and a moving jaw. For those who haven't seen the jaw in practice, it's basically functions like a human mouth, where we have our stationary palate and the jaw to crush, for instance, our food. The jaw crusher in context is a Telesmith 4248. This crusher was designed at the operation to have a close height setting of 130 and process material at 400 tons an hour. So this 130 correlates to the feed material. So this crusher is not supposed to be fed with material of a lump size above 750 millimeters. For the design of the subframe that we actually are studying in this presentation, we got specific crusher specifications from the OEM, in this case being Osborne. The static loading that we received, static and dynamic loads were 163 and 115 kilonewtons respectively at the hole down bolt area. And also the crusher's natural frequency is 3.6 hertz during operation. This implies that the crusher undergoes cyclic loads during operation. The jaw crusher subframe in context is a steel support structure that is fixed to a concrete platform. During the design phase of this subframe, it was actually assumed that the crusher and the subframe work as a rigid body. This means that the crusher and the subframe act as one body, and all the forces and all the deformation should be constant throughout the rigid body. The presentation focuses on dynamic loads being a function of metal fatigue. Dynamic loads are time-dependent forces. These forces may be imposed on structures through natural phenomena such as earthquakes, human activities such as explosives, and machine vibrations, which may be introduced by rotating equipment, such as the jaw crusher in context. However, structures do show resistance to dynamic loads in the form of internal forces. And these forces are related to the displacement and the velocities of the forces brought upon by the forces. Metal fatigue. Metal fatigue refers to the failure of material under the action of cyclic loads. Fatigue usually shows the signs. Initial signs are shown off by a crack forming on the structure, and the crack having gradual propagation up until we have failure on the structure. Just for a brief description of brief history of the equipment, the initial jaw crusher, the 4248 at this plant, was initially installed or was in service since 1986 to 2013. This crusher was actually replaced in 2013 because of the crusher's swing stock experiencing catastrophic failure. And upon further inspection, we found that the crusher had innumerable cracks throughout the mainframe. This is related to metal fatigue that this crusher has undergone. In 2013, we then decided to replace the crusher with a split frame jaw crusher. However, in 2017, this crusher showed cracks on its feet. So if you compare this, the currently installed crusher, it was in operation for approximately 4 to 5 years, which is a premature failure as compared to the crusher that was installed in 1987, which had a service life of 26. Cracks on the feet were kept on resurfacing after innumerable attempts to repair this crack. In 2021, this year, UT results revealed that the crusher had innumerable cracks on the feet, and it necessitated that we actually replace this crusher this year. Crusher base was also the first one was also in service since 1987, but however was replaced in 2018. Cracks during the crusher replacement, cracks were noted on the crusher base. However, what we did, these cracks were, okay, sorry about that. These cracks were noted on the crusher base in 2013, but were however repaired over the years, but they kept on resurfacing, and we kept on going back to repair them so that we can resume production. In 2018, due to the cracks on the crusher feet, we then noticed that the cracks might have been caused by the fatigued base flexing. So with this hypothesis, we subsequently decided to install support columns. These are the two support columns that we installed. So the attempt was, or the logic behind this was that we had to stiffen up the crusher base at the area where we saw the crusher feet cracking all the time. However, this initiative was futile since the cracks on the crusher base kept on resurfacing. So in 2018, it was decided that we actually install a new crusher base for this crushing unit. The picture at the bottom shows the crusher base that is currently in service at the quarry. However, the crusher base that was installed, it was only in service for approximately 2 years. But taking in consideration that we didn't run last year, I'd say it was actually less than 2 years. So in this year, March 2021, we found two indications of crack forming at the crusher feet. YouTube results confirmed that the crack was at the web, and it was in the region of 90 millimeters in length, and it has run through the 16 millimeter thick plate of the web. The problem statement to the team was that we had to find a root cause analysis to why the crack has initiated so quickly on the new crusher base. We are afraid that should we not understand the behavior of the subframe, we will end up with the same problems years to come with the new crusher installation. Before we could actually start with the root cause, we had to understand the design philosophy of the crusher base. The crusher base is mainly made up of mild steel, and it is a box design type of crusher base. A box design, what we mean is that the flange of the crusher base is supported by two web plates. In this case, being the two 16 millimeter plates across the crusher base. And also, we had to understand how the subframe was assembled. So how it was assembled. The plates were bevel welded on one another. This basically implies that the edges of the plates are prepared such that we allow full penetration welds of the members. The diagram below shows how the subframe is mounted on our concrete base, and it also shows the area where the crack has initiated. The presentation basically focuses on where the crack, only on the member that has cracked, and this is the web of the swing stock, where the swing stock is placed. The design stresses of the web is 256. So this was found from the dynamic loads and static loads which were given by the OEM. I'd like to maybe zoom in a bit. So as we can see from the model, high stresses were experienced at the hold down bolts as we had expected. And these stresses are in the region of 45 megapascal and 125 megapascals. The shear stresses during design phase, they were also determined, and we found that the shear stresses at that area was 62 megapascals, which is well below the allowable 291 megapascals for mild steel. From the design of this base, we established that the fatigue life of the crusher base was supposed to be 17 years, approximately 17 years before failure. The deflection was also analyzed on the subframe, and we found that the deflection in the z-axis is 0.2 millimeters, which is well below the allowable 7.2 millimeters for the span of this of the web. It is safe to say that from a design perspective, the frame was not expected to fail in such a short time, and it seemed as if it was a good design at that moment. A survey was performed in order to determine the vibration and the stress response of the jaw crusher subframe during operation. We installed accelerometers on the subframe foundation. On the subframe and the foundation, this is where we had our accelerometers. We also had accelerometers on the crusher feet and the subframe, on the lower mainframe of the crusher and the upper mainframe of the crusher. We also installed strain gauges strategically around the crusher and the subframe. The strain gauge, which was used to determine the stresses on the cracked area, was a triaxial Rosetta strain gauge. This is shown on the picture here below. These instruments would give us the dynamic response of the crusher and the sub base frame. And then what we were actually gunning for was that these loads and acceleration will be used to ensure a reliable crusher installation and reinforce the crusher base accordingly. This survey only was done in a day through feeding the crusher with different fragmentation, rock fragmentation. The fragmentation was blasted material, which is shown here at the top, and rock breaker material, which is shown at the bottom. The reason why we fed the crusher with different rock fragmentation was that due to the fragmentation of the material, the crushing forces are different. Since blasted material is a fine fragmentation pile, this fragmentation pile does not require high crushing forces due to high interparticle crushing. So we wanted to, in a way, get the forces that are brought upon by the crusher to crush the material through the different types of material that are fed to the crusher. The results that are shown from the accelerometers. So these accelerometers would show us how the crusher is actually, how the body of the crusher is actually responding to the stresses that are brought upon during crushing. From the picture that I showed initially, we only interested in the front right foot of the structure. So this is where the crack initiated. Level 1 is the subframe to the foundation attachment. We found out that the acceleration there, it's about 1 meters per second squared. Level 2 is the mainframe, the crusher leg to the subframe, and we found out that the acceleration there is 3 meters per second. Level 3 and 4, it's the accelerometers at the crusher mainframe. We found out that the accelerations in the regions of 4.5 meters per second. From this experiment, we established that the crusher does not really respond as a rigid body onto the subframe. So the initial assumption that the subframe and the crusher is one body was incorrect. That's what was established from this experiment. From the strain gauges, we determined the stresses on the subframe. These are the results on the strain gauges that were placed on the subframe where the crack initiated. We found out that the peak-to-peak stresses on that area is 45.5 megapascal. From the data which we collected from the experiment, we then consulted stress and cycle curves to determine the fatigue life of the subframe. These tests actually showed that the response is dominant in the fundamental crusher frequency of 3.6 as given off by the OEEM. However, since what we noticed is from the SN curve, in order to, before I say that, due to the welds, so when the structure fails, chances are it's going to start failing from the welds down into the parent betal. So the SN curve, it's more focuses on the welds of this subframe unit. So the welds, since they are full penetration welds, they are a class F weld that is studied on these SN curves. So from the SN curve, class F, it shows that in order for the structure, the subframe, to reach infinite life, it has to not have stresses, should not have stresses above 40 MPa. However, from the experiment, we did see that at that area, we do have stresses that are above that 40 MPa. So from the analysis of the stress analysis showed that the subframe in this area is inclined to finite life and premature failure as experienced in practice. Through research, we had to try to study the subframe further. We found out that since this structure, from our calculation, it has went over 10 million cycles, which is well above the 7 million cycles shown in the SN curve. So due to this, we noticed that the crusher, instead, the 40 MPa mark is actually too high for this cycle of this subframe is actually going under. So from that research, we noticed that to get finite life to this subframe, the crushing forces or stresses should be below 20 MPa. The results given by the accelerometers also showed that the jaw crusher is not acting as a rigid body to the subframe. And the final conclusion to the root cause to the crack is that the subframe failed due to premature metal fatigue. It has, however, been recommended that the FEA model will have to be updated with the implementation of the estimated input loads, as well as consideration of the high cycle fatigue correction factors. So the proposed solution, in order to increase the fatigue life of the subframe, the loads on the subframe have to be, from the crusher to the subframe, have to be taken down to stresses below 20. This can be done through installing dampers between the subframe and the jaw crusher. We did consult with Osborne. However, at the moment, the dampers that we're looking for, they're still in a trialing phase. They haven't actually developed a product which we can use for this subframe. So we were only left with option 2 to increase the frequency of cyclic loads through stiffening the subframe. The proposed solution for the subframe is to install 2 support struts, as was done on the old sub-base frame. This logic was derived from equations of motion. So here we have, through stiffening, the K factor being the spring stiffness of the structure has to be increased. So it will be done so through the supports. Once that is increased, the radial frequency goes up, and in turn gives us a high frequency behavior of the structure. Having the high frequency behavior of the structure, obviously the cyclic loads are not the 3. We expect them not to be the 3.6, but to be at a higher frequency. So as soon as we do that, we are going to have a follow-up survey to determine the loads after we have executed the proposal. Okay, this comes to the end of the presentation. So if there's any questions or maybe there's slides I need to clarify, I'm open to that.
Thank you very much, Padima. Are there any questions? Okay, so we just thought it would be good sharing that. That is our Padima Dwaba, engineer at AFRISAM Gauteng, and candidate PR mechanical engineer. Okay, thank you very much, Padima.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that, everyone, and bearing with us. I think, you know, just like the rest of the students online, etc., it's important that you'll come up and, you know, take this platform to practice in terms of your technical understands and abilities. And, you know, there's no right from wrongs. We all learn from each other. And look, you're welcome to get into contact with Padima should you wish and want to know more about the interest of our Jaw Crushers run and some of the investigations that we are embarking on. Okay, I think that's come to the end of our program. We've managed to fortunately gain on some time, so which is never a bad thing. We can get to some other work. Just before I hand over to Nico, I just wanted to pave way for the next meeting. And so what we will be trying to do is, I think it's important through some of the discussions today, we get in another voluntary association, either from SIMACI, SAICE or SAIEE, so civil electrical. And maybe we can network, you know, to understand what they do on their side as a membership and look at some possible mentorship and coaching areas where they can support some of the colleagues here who don't have the necessary structures. So I'll try and arrange something of that sort. And then maybe I'll chat to Nico as well to see if we can get a professor or expert in the area to put together something on mentorship and coaching, so which will give us some good feedback for some of the students. And then, yeah, if I have time, myself will do maybe electrical presentation on one of the projects on the MV and LV side that we've concluded from design to implementation. Yeah, if there's any other presentations or students that would like to present, please, if you could email Anneke or Nico or myself, I would really appreciate that, you know, as an industry, we all get involved and try our best. It doesn't need to be fully focused on engineering. I mean, there's a lot of management here as well. And if you'll have some areas to share with us, you know, for growth and development of youngsters, it will really be appreciated. Okay, so before I hand over to Nico, are there any questions or comments or ways that we can improve this committee meeting? Okay, now thank you very much from my side. Nico, if I could hand over to yourself.
Thanks, Theolan. I'll be short. I just want to thank you for handling this for me or for us as an industry. You're a star. And thanks to our speakers and to the people that have asked questions. I think it was a very, very great, successful workshop this. Let us have any ideas, send them to me or to Anneke. We'll share it with Theolan. He's our chairperson. And all go well and keep warm. The cold weather is coming. Go well and keep warm, please. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.